Welcome back, friends, to Surviving the Daily. I hope everyone is surviving well. Today we are dyeing some scales. As you can see, we have the scales from the famous Ozark Trail Wug Out, Drop Out, Bug Out, whatever you want to call it, as well as the scales from my most recent knife purchase, the Felissa 4.5-inch folding pocket knife. Yes, I did purchase it in pink only because that was a color available at the time. And we have RIT Dye More synthetic dye in the color of graphite. That was the closest I could find to black. And we want to keep this stirred as well as possible. Keep it all mixed up. Now, I did try to get this as close to a 8-to-1 mixture, and I did it all by eye. So, was it that close? I don't know, but it did a very good job. Now, we want to get this to a slow to medium boil. We don't want to get it too hot because we don't want to. We don't want to melt the scales. And as you can see, I'm wearing gloves, and I do have pans next to the stove because we don't want to get any surfaces or ourselves covered in dye, because that dye is not going to come up. As you can see, we are ready to dip some scales in. So let's do it. Let's start with the Bug Out. Give it one last stir before we put the scales in. And we do have these scales tied by a string just so we can dip them in. Now, I did not time this. I can't tell you how long I left it in there, but it is a dark color. The longer that we leave it in there, the darker the scales get. So I want to say it was no longer than a minute and a half that I did end up leaving the scales in. I apologize for my elbow. There was a lot of elbow shots in these videos. I did cut them out. I think the Wug Out, the Dropout scales are done. And let's get the Felissa scales in there. That will give us the best contrast, I think. But I did see after making these videos that a lot of other YouTubers were using or just throwing the whole knife into the boiling pot of water, and they had problems with losing the paint on the pivot as well as the scale screws. So I definitely recommend, if you can, take apart the knife and put the scales in the water by themselves. Now, it is not for the faint of heart taking these knives apart, especially crossbar or lock knives, but I do believe that is the best way to go about it. We're just going to drop these scales in here just one last time, just to make sure that we have a good overall covering. Now, if you do this, make sure you start off with a inexpensive knife, because it's not for the faint of heart. Again, taking these knives apart, and the crossbar locks do pose a hassle trying to get them back together, as well as things can go wrong, and you don't want to go wrong on a very expensive knife right off the bat. So, taking them out of the water, we're going to rinse them off in cold water, to cool them down, as well as to make sure that there is no bleeding from the scales. I get all that excess dye off. And then we're going to dry these extremely well. I patted them dry with some paper towels, as you can see right here. And then once they were as dry as I could get with the paper towels, I hung them in front of a very large fan and let the fan dry it for maybe 10-15 minutes. We don't want to transfer any of this water to the inside of the knife, especially these inexpensive knives with inexpensive steels. I think that came out very well. Nice and dark. And at this point in time, I'm extremely excited to get these knives put back together, see how they look. And here's the final look. This is the Ozark Trail Wug Out Dropout. And doesn't that look sharp? Looks like a whole new knife. Now, one thing I did notice after filming these videos is that once I got these out into the sunlight, the original color does shine a little through the dye, and I think it kind of gives it some character. and I think that has a lot to do with the fact that I used the color graphite. I didn't use black. So, but again, I think it gives it a lot of character. That especially the Felissa kind of has a hint of pink or purple in the sunlight. It's pretty sharp looking. Again, if you're going to do this with cheap knives to start off with. Taking these scales off was not for the faint of heart. It was kind of a pain in the ass, to be honest with you, trying to get the Felissa back together. The dropout with the Ozark Trail, it was a lot easier than the Felissa, for whatever reason. But we're going to show you a side-by-side in a second. The initial look of the knives as well as the final look of the knives. So we have the Ozark Trail on top and the Felissa on bottom. And look how much different they look. And putting them back together, I was able to adjust them both to the way I like them. But I want to thank you for stopping in and checking out this video. I greatly appreciate it. I hope everyone's having a great day, and I will see you next time.